when I bring this up, a lot of people are going to say they're Oklahoma. Of course, they're confident. They've got elite athletes all over the place. They've got one of the best coaches in college football, experienced staff. They know what they're doing. They're Oklahoma. Of course, they're confident. They've owned the Big 12 for 6 years and, in a sense, going on like 20-some years. But at the same time, there's something that you sense and other people sense in just a different level of confidence.
Yeah, I think that's the case, Mark. It's kind of to your point, it's a kind of an interesting discussion because, yes, they've owned the Big 12 over the last 5, 6, 10 years, however you want to put it. They've had to have so many, consecutive championships in the Big 12. So, they've kind of been patted on the back as far as that goes. Then when you look at it nationally, there's this dark cloud that's hanging over the program right now, not being able to win the playoff game. Or, it's been 20 years since Oklahoma has won, 21 years actually since Oklahoma's won a national championship, and they've been there a few times. They've been there in 2003 against LSU, lost. They were there in 2004 against USC and lost. There in 2008 against Florida, national championship game is lost, and then certainly the 3 consecutive playoff appearances and lost in the semifinals in all 3 of those games. So I think Oklahoma going into last year, no matter if the pandemic was going on, I think, most people inside the program and most people kind of looking at that program knew that this was a team that was probably a year or 2 away, given the youth that they had on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensively, still just kind of in year 2 of Grinch's, stint as defensive coordinator. This year, the conversation appears to be a little bit different, really on both sides of the ball. We've talked obviously today a lot about on the offensive side of the ball, but there's just a different tone to the conversation. It seems like, Mark, a lot of times in previous years you'd be looking at whether it be maybe the linebackers or the secondary or, the offensive line or whatever it may be, coaches are kind of looking for those players to step up. Now, from a depth perspective, it's a little bit different, on both sides of the ball, and there's not really as much concern about depth. In a lot of positions, Oklahoma is really solid, going 3 deep and being comfortable, whether it be the defensive line, whether it be the receivers, whether it be the secondary, whatever that discussion point might be. The depth is there. The quality depth is there. Really, it's more about finding those guys that have separated themselves maybe a little bit more than the others. So I think Oklahoma knows that, certainly this is the year. The kids know, the coaches know, anybody surrounding the program. I don't know that this is necessarily, if it's not this year, when is it going to be? But it looks like this is set up in such a way for Oklahoma to make a run this year. So I think barring just a wholesale of injuries or something that's not, that's not foreseen, if this team at the very least doesn't make it to the playoffs, it'll be a pretty big disappointing year. And certainly when they get there, they need to be in a position to be able to win that game. And they, on paper right now, we'll see how things go, obviously throughout the spring and then early on in the fall. But this team on paper has every chance, every opportunity, and should, win a playoff game. Certainly once you get to the playoffs, you got to have the ball maybe bounce your way a couple of times, and you have to have breaks, and matchups are good. But I think when you look at Oklahoma's roster this year, who may be gone next year, specifically when you think about the defensive line, and then you think about some of these other teams that they're going to be competing against from a playoff spot. You look at Georgia, you look at Ohio State, you look at Alabama, you look at Clemson, you look at some of those teams, maybe even the Notre Dame if they get back into there this year. Every team has maybe a little bit of question marks that Oklahoma necessarily wouldn't. Oklahoma went into last year with Spencer Rattler. Yes, he was highly recruited, but how good of a quarterback would he be? Alabama is going to be answering the same questions this year with Bryce Young. I think a couple of times we talked about Ohio State. They don't have I believe you had mentioned they don't have a kid who's taken a meaningful snap at the quarterback position, coming into this year. Clemson, coming in with DJ, he's a little bit more seasoned, played a decent amount last year. So he's probably the lowest, in terms of question marks, at that position as well. Georgia came in. JT Daniels played really, really well towards the end of the year, but then you have the ACL injury to George Pickens that happened earlier. That's a big blow for them. So when you look at all of these things kind of surrounding them across the country, even Texas, when you think about Texas just from a conference perspective, they've had to miss a good week of spring practice. Like, all of these things seem to be pointing in the direction that Oklahoma has that opportunity to definitely win a national championship, at the very least win that first playoff game to kind of get that monkey off their back.
I will remind Big 12 fans that Iowa State may have something to say about it, just because while their roster 1 to 100 doesn't compare to Oklahoma's, all those stars are back on offense and defense for Iowa State: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, all conference players. And then Mike Rose on defense, they look in really good shape. And of course, Matt Campbell's one of the best in the business. So that could be, again, a big challenge for the Sooners right there.
And I think it will be. I think you look at Iowa State. Yeah, to your point, everybody's back on offense. I think they're returning 10 of 11 starters, if I remember correctly. There was a few kids that elected to come back for their bonus senior year this year. So I think they will be legitimate top 10. Texas may be top 10, but it's probably more on kind of reputation more than anything. But Iowa State will be legitimate top 10 and really has an opportunity, that they have an early game against Iowa. If they can win that game and avoid the inexplicable loss that they typically see early in the year to a team that they're certainly much better than, they have an opportunity to certainly challenge Oklahoma and be in the same conversation that Oklahoma's in right now.
There you have it from Jason Ray. You see it on the banner, lastwordoncollegefootball.com. Please check out his work and everybody else there over on Last Word. All right, Jason, appreciate you stopping by as always. Enjoy that we do this each and every week, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.